There's a particular kind of silence that makes an entire room shift its energy without a single word being spoken, and most people spend their whole life trying to earn respect through talking louder, explaining harder, and proving more, when the people who actually command it figured out the exact opposite approach a long time ago. And today we're breaking down exactly how that works. The first thing worth understanding is a concept from communication theory called information leverage, which explains why the person who says the least in a meeting is often assumed to know the most, because human perception fills gaps automatically. When someone withholds commentary, our brains default to assuming they're holding back something significant rather than assuming they simply have nothing to add. And that automatic assumption is the exact opposite of what most people expect, since talking constantly was supposed to signal expertise but actually does the reverse. The second trick comes from an old diplomatic principle used in treaty negotiations for centuries, the idea that the party who reveals their position last controls the terms of the conversation, because once you've spoken your full opinion, everyone else can react and adjust around it. But the person who waits, who lets others reveal their positions first, retains far more control over how the conversation actually unfolds and translated into daily life. This simply means letting people finish fully, even past the point of discomfort, before offering your own view. Third, and this one gets missed constantly, is the difference between response speed and response weight. When someone asks you a direct question and you take a beat before answering, even a short one, it signals that your words carry enough weight to be worth considering before they're spoken, while rapid, reflexive answers, even correct ones, often get processed as less deliberate and therefore less authoritative, regardless of the actual content. Fourth, there's a specific physical habit worth understanding here, which is that people who command respect without effort tend to slow their gestures down noticeably compared to everyone else in the room, because rushed, jittery movement reads as anxiety or eagerness for approval, while slower, more deliberate movement, even something as small as reaching for a glass of water without hurrying, signals to everyone watching that this person isn't operating from urgency, and urgency, more than almost anything else, is what erodes perceived status in a room. Fifth, there's a psychological concept called the authority gap that explains why interruptions work so differently depending on who does them. Most people avoid ever interrupting because they've been taught it's rude, but the specific way someone handles being interrupted matters more than whether it happens at all, because someone who simply pauses, waits, and continues exactly where they left off, without rushing to reclaim the floor or getting visibly rattled, actually gains more perceived authority than someone who was never interrupted in the first place, since the calm recovery itself becomes the demonstration of status. If any of this is making you picture someone specific whose presence you've never been able to fully explain, that reaction is worth sitting with, because most people experience this dynamic constantly without ever identifying the mechanics behind it. Sixth, there's something counterintuitive about eye contact worth understanding here that goes beyond the basics people usually hear. Commanding presence isn't about holding a stare the longest, it's about where your eyes go during a pause, because someone who breaks eye contact by looking thoughtfully to the side while considering an answer, rather than looking down or away nervously, signals genuine internal processing rather than discomfort, and that specific direction of the gaze, sideways and reflective instead of downward and evasive, changes the entire read of the moment. Seventh, tone matters far more than volume in commanding a room, and this is something almost everyone gets backwards, because raising your voice to be heard actually signals that you don't trust the room to listen without force, while lowering your volume slightly during an important point forces people to lean in and pay closer attention just to catch what's being said, and that physical leaning in creates an unconscious sense of engagement that shouting could never produce. Eighth, there's a specific habit worth adopting around unfinished sentences that almost nobody uses intentionally, which is trailing off deliberately on a point that's already been clearly understood, rather than finishing every sentence completely, because over-explaining a point people already grasp signals insecurity about whether you were understood, while trusting the room enough to leave the ending implied communicates a level of confidence that full explanation actually undermines. Ninth, and this rarely gets discussed directly, people who command quiet respect tend to ask fewer permission-seeking questions embedded in their speech. Phrases like, "Does that make sense?" or "If that's okay with everyone," tacked onto statements that didn't need them, because those small verbal habits, even when well-intentioned, quietly signal that approval is being sought, rather than simply stated, and removing them from your language changes how declarative your presence feels almost instantly. And the 10th piece, the one holding everything else together, is understanding that commanding respect without saying much was never about being cold or withholding warmth. It's about being economical, saying exactly what needs to be said and letting the rest exist in the space around your words instead of filling every available second with noise, because the brain naturally assigns more weight to scarce things than abundant ones, and words are no exception to that rule. So here's what to actually take from this. Once it ends, most people believe respect has to be earned through constant demonstration, through explaining, proving, and filling every silence to make sure their value gets noticed. But the people who actually hold a room without raising their voice figured out that restraint reads as strength precisely because it's rare, and the next time you feel the urge to fill a silence just to avoid the discomfort of it sitting there, that exact moment is where this entire skill either gets built or quietly gets given away.